Voting for Candace Owens.
Candace Owens is not on any ballot, especially when it comes to the black part. So with people like us, it's complicated because we do have our black identity, we do have our African identity, and we also have our Muslim identity, which we now have to straddle back and forth. Getting a ballot paper that has so many positions and so many choices, is it fair to just choose someone because they're black, they look like you, and they'll take care of business for you?
She'll probably say
Yeah,
no.
I mean, like voting for Candace Owens.
Candace Owens is not on any ballot.
She'll probably say no
right now.
because
Okay.
Johnny O doesn't look like us. But
Johnny O does not look like us,
But
and there is
he's-
somebody who's
but
running
he's-
against him who might look like us, and I would not recommend voting for that person. What I would say is that there are layers to it. Okay, so sometimes we have individuals who are running for a position, and maybe they have very similar positions, but one looks like you, one does not look like you. I wouldn't say that is enough. But I would also say that it's interesting that we are having this conversation because our counterparts are not having the conversation in the same way. Because for a majority of the American history, the people who have been elected, and especially into this higher positions of office, have been older white males.
Yeah.
And then we had a little bit of, older white women getting into positions. And so what I would say is that there is a shift that is happening. One, because there was once upon a time when women were not allowed to be in these positions. There was a time when people of color were not allowed to be in these positions by law. And so it is important to acknowledge the fact that there has been some shifts, and that is important. The reason why it's important is because we have this conversation, the three of us, the four of us, and we all have different perspectives, even though we look similar and we have similar experiences, right? The whole point of having these conversations is because I come in with a point of view. I'm able to interact with you guys and learn something different. My point of view might not have been changed. It may have been changed, but this is where growth happens, is in conversations like this. If there is no one having the conversation who represents a demographic that is different from what has always been there, then when will that voice actually be heard? And I don't think that our representatives lack the ability to represent or consider the concerns of the constituents who come to them that don't look like them. But there does come a point in time, and Denzel Washington talked about this when he talked about directors, right? Like, why would you have Spielberg do Schindler's List? Why would you have
That was
someone
a dumb
else?
question that person asked, but I mean, I felt kind of bad that
I mean,
That
give
question was
people
asked.
context to people
So
who don't know
Denzel,
what you guys are talking about.
Washington was asked a question, and it was about, like, why would you have this particular director do this film? Why can't you have someone like Spielberg? Why can't you have someone else, right? So Spielberg has a connection to the Jewish community and therefore can tell that story better. There are Irish people who can tell their story better, right? And his example that he gave was the hot comb. So as a black woman, you would understand what it means to have a hot comb. If you grew up in a black household in America, you understand what that means. Not only do you understand what it means, you don't have to Google it and see the dictionary what it is. You understand the sound. You understand the smell. You understand when it's done, like Easter Sunday and all of that, right? So the cultural
pain.
context
the grease.
through experience
All right.
is important. And there are many ways to do this. Unfortunately, some of our leadership has not chosen some of the ways that they can participate. And one of the ways you can participate is by having a diverse staff. Making sure that your staff is reflective of the constituency that you represent. Not only that, making sure that you interact with the stakeholders that exist within your constituency. So if there is a Kenyan organization, making sure that you spend time with them. If there's a, Nepalese, if it's Arab American, if it's, if your leadership is not doing that, then it makes sense to get someone that will do that because they are part of your community, they've lived in your community, and maybe it boils down to that they look like you, but it really is those other factors that are super important.
And it's interesting you bring that up. I was in like it was a Zoom forum organized by the Muslim Forum of Montgomery County, and they were talking to all the different, not just the Muslim candidates, but they brought together all candidates who are running for the Board of Education, and they were talking, and some very simple questions were being asked, and I could clearly tell some of these people who are answering these questions, they probably do not have a Muslim staffer, and that's the reason why they're answering the way they're answering. And to me, it wasn't even about the position they were giving, but it's a sensitivity, it's a lack of sensitivity in which the message came out.
Right.
And you could clearly see, man, these are votes being lost. These are votes being lost. These are votes being gained. And that's the reason why when you talk about diversity in staff, you have to pick people who are gonna, show you your blind spots.
Right.
Yeah. There's some areas where you just don't know simply because you don't know. There's no person who has a monopoly of knowledge. Even when you have access to, the internet and all that, you'll not be able to get to know everything. And I think that's just where some leadership falls short.
No. In addition to that, I think if you guys recall, there's a time we were really trying to look for a subject matter expert,
right,
who was a mental health expert,
but
was culturally sensitive.
Yes.
Yes.
And took us a while to get that.
To find one, yeah.
But thanks to Awor, we found Becky and Ngetich.
Yes.
You remember we had that session. But we were specific in that we were looking for a mental health expert who was culturally sensitive, somebody who understands the African culture when it comes to mental health. Just understanding that. And because we could have brought anyone on, but somebody who has not lived, interacted, probably even born and raised within
that community,
you cannot make it. So I think there's also that, to support Annette's point, there's also that thing of knowing, but also if you don't, like you're saying, Ali, get somebody to watch your blind spot.
Yes.
Right.
And right now, I'll be honest with you with what's happening now within the Muslim community. We'll also shortly be talking about Gaza and how it may impact the elections in November. Within the Muslim community, I think because of the sudden impact of what has happened in Gaza and the number of people who have been killed, I'll be very honest with you, people are voting based on someone being a Muslim. Now, there's a whole history and common set of values that we share, even with a Muslim that I just met. So I can tell you that's something that's happening. And on the Montgomery County ballot, on the people who are on the ballot for the Democratic National Convention, there's Biden, and the uncommitted list, there's 6 slots, 5 of them are Muslims. So there's something that's deliberately being done there. And even for the district, I believe it's District 6, there is a Muslim who's running, and people are actively voting for him. I think, and I'm not saying you should vote for someone just because, or you should vote, but then I think with what Annette explained, especially when it comes to the black part, so with people like us, it's complicated because we do have our black identity, we do have our African identity, and we also have our Muslim identity, which we now have to straddle back and forth, all the time when we're making all these decisions. But it's one of those things is that you have to make sure that this person is aligned with your values, because sometimes you could have someone from the same community, but they're not necessarily aligned with your values. There was someone who Mike mentioned earlier on, Candace Owens. Some people feel like she's not aligned with the values of the black community, so maybe they would vote for her, maybe not.
Hell no.
Well, fortunately, she's not on any ballots right now.
She's not on any ballots, yes.
So
and neither is she being invited to the cookout.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, but what I can say, and that is an important point to say. What I can say is that we have to look at our candidates not just based off of what is going on in the current news cycle, but many of these upper ballots are people who have been in positions before. So what did they do before, right? So for example, in my district, Johnny Olszewski is running for Congress, and he's running to replace Dutch Ruppersberger, who is retiring. And we do have many people who are retiring. This is a trend that we're seeing with some of our older elected officials. So what has he done prior to deciding that he wants to run for Congress? Where was he before? He was in the Maryland state delegate position at one point in time. Mm-hmm. He is currently the county executive. As the county executive, he established the new the Immigration Affairs Office, and then from that we have the New Americans Task Force, which I happen to be a part of. These are things and initiatives that he did before I, as Annette Karanja, got involved in the county government. Because of these decisions, the Kenyan American community within Baltimore County had an opportunity to interact with him on a different type of level. And now if you find our, and I'm very proud to show here, if you find our Welcoming and Belonging Strategic Plan, which was released by the task force, when you look inside, you're going to find a picture of Johnny Olszewski with some Kenyans, children here. Mm-hmm. This is from an event that happened years prior to that office being established. That is significant, which means that the interest and the desire to come and interact with our community happened before there was even an Immigration Affairs Office. And then you continue and you see that there are nonprofits that are featured here that are run by Kenyans, more than one. And then you'll also see numbers based off of the feedback that Kenyan Americans were having. And it's not just us. Arab Americans, Nepalese Americans, different organizations put in their input into this strategic plan, right? So this isn't just about Kenyans. This is about someone being interested and showing their interest in the diversity of the county that they represent. That is a reason why I can get behind this person, because even before Annette Karanja came to the scene, he was doing the work to connect with the community that I am a part of. And I appreciate that because it is genuine. There are some people who, in contrast, might decide that now that they're running, all of a sudden you see them in your church, all of a sudden you see them at your organization and at the cookout. Yeah. You've never seen them before.
You've never seen them before.
And you might never see them again. Look at the track record, and don't just look in the last news cycle. Look what happened last year if they were an elected official. What were they doing and how did it impact your community? It's a very important thing to the strategy when it comes to researching.